If your business can't pay its bills, taking the wrong advice off the wrong person at the wrong time could cost you a whole lot more than just closing your business. Every week I speak with directors who can't pay HMRC, can't pay the bounce back loan, can't pay the C-bills, and they've got creditors breathing down the neck. Now, insolvency, when it's done right, can be the right route for absolutely everyone involved. But if you get this wrong, and you could, people lose everything. They lose the home, they're made bankrupt, some people get disqualified, and in the worst cases, some people go to prison. Now, in this video, I'm going to take you behind the scenes on two real-life cases that were done last month. One is a recruitment company. The market therein has been decimated, they're sinking under tax debt, and they're past that point of no return. The other company is a multi-site business. It's getting crushed by landlord demands, rising costs, and a slowdown in sales. And I'm going to show you exactly how these directors avoided disaster, how they protected themselves, and in both cases, they walked away with a fresh start. If you are in financial trouble, if you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, if there's too much month at the end of the money, this could be the most important video that you watch today. So stay with me to the end, because I'm going to break down exactly how this works and how to make sure you don't get caught in the worst mistakes. It's Chris Worden, I'm from Director First. Welcome back to the channel. Now, the first company I want to talk to you about is a recruitment company, okay? This company had gone on for about 6 or 7 years. It's always paid its tax on time, but there are huge issues across the recruitment world right now. And the company had debt to VAT of about 15,000, PAYE of about 58,000, and a bounce back loan of 39,000. So one of the first things that we do is we dive into it and go, right, Mr. Director, what did you spend your bounce back loan on? And did you apply for the right amount? He applied 50,000 quid, but in 2019, he turned over £200,000. So he's got no issues there. And what this director spent it on, he used some of it as drawings, okay? Now, he didn't take it all out in a lump sum 2 days after he got the loan. He basically spent the loan over an 18-month period, a lot of it personally. Now, that is not illegal. What that has caused this guy is something called an overdrawn director's loan account. And on our first call, I says, let me have a look at your last set of accounts on Company's House. And I could see in those accounts, this guy had an overdrawn director's loan account, but they were about 12 months overdue. Now, most firms don't mention that on the first day. They want you to understand whether you're insolvent or not, and if you are insolvent, they want to bill you to get you into liquidation. Then they're going to start looking at things like director's loan accounts. We're a little bit different here, because what I want to do for you is to help you understand what your options are, but also what are the implications of taking the options that you need to take. Now, with this guy, he had a director's loan account. It was clear as day. But it was 12-month-old information. So the problem is that figure has changed. It could have gone up, which is bad, or it could have gone down, which is good, certainly from the director's point of view. It's dead easy for me to find that out. I said, Mr. Director, have you taken money out of this business in the last 12 months? Of course he has. He's got a family to feed. He's got mortgages to pay. And I asked him, right, well, how much have you taken out? And then I asked the question is, what did you take that money out with? Was it salary? Was it dividends in his head? And he told me what most directors tell me. Well, I take £1,000 a month salary and I top the rest up as dividends. And I've said, listen, your problem with that is you're entitled to take a salary, okay? So the 12 grand you took as salary has not increased your director's loan account. But the money that you think you've taken as dividends, that is going to get converted, because it's an illegal dividend. It's not an illegal you go into prison dividend. It's a dividend you can't take, because you can only take dividends out of profits on the company, okay? Now this company was insolvent, therefore it had no distributable profits. So all that money that he'd taken that wasn't payroll salary is going to be converted into a director's loan account. So we worked it out and it ended up at £75,000. And I've had to tell him, listen, on liquidation, you're going to be asked to pay that back. Now, I've not took a penny off him up until this point, okay? I'm just advising him for free. And I've said, listen, you've got to get into liquidation because you're past the point of no return. There was absolutely no way that this business was going to be able to get back on its feet given the problems that the market that it operated in was. And there were some issues with insurances, there was some issues with a factoring company, which I'm going to come to in a minute. But problem one was this director's loan account. So most people, again, don't talk to you in great detail about this. They certainly don't go into the level of detail that I do before you appoint them, okay? And the cynic in me, right? If you appoint an insolvency practitioner, there's no going back. You are in bed together for as long as it takes. And if you've got an overdrawn loan account, it sits as an asset on the balance sheet, and the insolvency practitioner is duty bound to try and get that money off you. So what I do is I go to one of the IPs that I work with and I've said, right, there's a director's loan account here of £75,000. Here are my workings out. The first thing they say, well, have we got any hope of recovery? Okay? Now remember, if you're in rented accommodation and you're on benefits, there's very little hope of recovery. Therefore, an insolvency practitioner is not going to take action against you in most cases, okay? Some will frighten you to death and say they will, but what is the point of spending money and time chasing someone down the legal route if they have nothing? Now, this guy wasn't in that position. This guy had a property, and the property was valued at £350,000, and he had a £220,000 mortgage, okay? So there's a fair bit of equity in that property. So this guy was not going to get his director's loan account written off. He was definitely going to have to get some type of deal done on it. Now, this guy was really worried. I'm not looking at the camera because I'm going to talk you through how we got this deal done on his director's loan account. Now, there are some firms, again, who will not mention this, and you'll appoint them. Once you've appointed an insolvency practitioner, there's not much deals getting done on directors' loan accounts. You've got to use this information to your advantage, okay? So we go to the IP and say, right, there is a mortgage of £220,000 on a house valued at £350,000. So to the layman, there is about £130,000 equity in that property, and the director's loan account was 75 grand. All right, so he's going to have to all pay it back. No, a deal can get done, and let me explain to you why. Although that property is worth 350,000, an insolvency practitioner has got to make a judgment call and go, if I made this director bankrupt by pursuing him, would I get all the money back? Okay, and you're watching there and thinking, Chris, there's 130 grand's worth of equity in that property. Of course they'll get all the money back. No, they won't, right? And I'm going to explain to you why they won't. First of all, let's take the house. It's worth £350,000. Sorry, £350,000. Now, in a bankruptcy, there's a for sale value, okay? So let's take 10% off that property. So it's now worth £315,000, okay? There's a mortgage of £220,000. And remember, they're the first person to get paid. And then there is £95,000. And you're probably thinking, well, there's £95,000 left. He only owes 75 grand on his director's loan account. You're going to get it all back, Chris. No, there is more. So out of that £95,000 that's left, you've got an estate agent fees. Let's say it's 1%. That's 3,780 to come off the 95,000. There's also conveyancing fees. Let's put 3.5 grand down for the solicitor's fees. So the available funds is £87,620. But this director was married and his spouse had nothing to do with the company. Now, an insolvency practitioner cannot take your partner's equity. They've got no claim on that equity if that husband or wife has nothing to do with the company. So we're now down to 43,000 and a little bit of change. So, okay, there's £43,000 equity if this property is sold. But you've got to remember is, in a bankruptcy, there are lots and lots of costs. I'm going to go through a few. a petitioning cost of 2,400. An official receiver cost, okay, that's set at 6,000 plus VAT, so £7,200. There is a trustee in bankruptcy cost, and that is 15% of realisations. It can go up. So that's nearly 8 grand's worth of cost there on the trustee in bankruptcy cost. And then we've got the solicitor's costs. And on the, on a good day, a solicitor can charge like a wounded rhino. Okay, so let's put in that cost of a solicitor making this director bankrupt at £20,000. It could be less, but I've seen cases where it's a hell of a lot more. And then you've got a trustee of expenses of about £1,000. So, in all of that we've just gone through, remember the available equity in bankruptcy is going to be £43,000, right? But there's £38,000 worth of cost to make this director bankrupt. Okay, so if all that happened, what would the insolvency practitioner get in a bankruptcy? Well, on these figures, it'd be £5,324, and that's not all. Because this director had personal debt. He had about 15 grand's worth of personal debt. So in a bankruptcy, there'd be very, and by the way, the insolvency practitioner hasn't been paid yet. So in a bankruptcy, creditors would get zero. So I got a deal done with this guy at £12,000 as full and final. And he was able to raise some money and pay it in as full and final. 12,000 quid. He writ off most of his director's loan account. Most people in my industry don't do this, and they don't explain to you what I've just told you, okay? Complication number 2, there was a factoring company involved, okay? For those of you that don't know about factoring, it's essentially when a financial institution will lend you money on an invoice. Let's say you're on 60-day terms, you put the invoice on their portal, they will lend you, I don't know, up to 90% of that invoice and they'll charge you for it, right? But a factoring company has a charge at company's house. They have a debenture over this company, which means they make the decision to who controls the liquidation, okay? I'm talking generally here, guys, okay? But a lot of factoring companies will have a panel of insolvency practitioners, normally larger insolvency practitioners, and if you go into liquidation, they will force you into a certain insolvency practitioner, which is never normally in your best interests. So we had to think about this and go, well, what are the risks? And we actually spoke to the factoring company. They had the power to appoint their own insolvency practitioner, but we had a conversation with them, told them what was going on, and worked closely with them, okay? So we secured their approval before we hit the button, okay? They allowed the director to make the appointment, okay? They allowed the director to appoint the insolvency practitioner of his choosing. So this was a tricky job. There was a director's loan account in there. There was a factoring company. But the director was able to walk away without personal financial ruin, and he has been able to restart again. He's been able to start his business again and get up and running. Okay? Yes, it's cost him 12 grand. He's had to pay the cost to liquidate the business. But it could have been a whole lot worse. Now, I want to talk to you about case number 2. Now, this was a company that had a number of sites. And the problem was some of the sites were loss-making. They were getting quite a lot of pressure from some of the landlords. Obviously, overheads had gone through the roof. There were costs had increased all over the business. And the problem was his sales had slowed down. So when your costs are high, your sales slow down, it's a recipe for disaster, okay? Now, the debts had grown to over £1 million. And again, the key thing here was there was no clear path to profitability. This business was past the point of no return, okay? And the biggest challenge was an aggressive landlord who was pushing for overdue rent. Now, thankfully, there was no personal guarantees tied to the leases. So if you're in a lease and you're thinking of closing your company, you've got to consider is, have you personally guaranteed that lease? Are there going to be any dilapidations claims? All that means is you've got to put the premises back to its original state. And most landlords, again, you can improve their property if you've got the wrong landlord, you'll leave there and they will land you for a bill of tens of £1,000s to put it back to the dump that it was before you took over, okay? True. Right, so what did we do here? The solution was we looked at whether it's an administration or a liquidation. And the reason why it wasn't really an administration is, although they were buying a few pieces of equipment, a lot of staff were being made redundant, and the cost towards an administration really didn't seem like an admin, so they went down the liquidation route, okay? The landlords were demanding immediate payment and they were threatening something called a winding up petition, so they had to move quick, right? Now, because the company was vastly insolvent, okay, owed over £1 million, if they had started paying certain suppliers and the landlords before the liquidation had ensued, there could have been an issue with something called a preference payment. And that means when your business is insolvent, so you can't pay your debts when they fall due, you need to treat all your creditors equally and allow an insolvency practitioner really to distribute the funds, okay? Now, what we decided to do with this director, we got the insolvency practitioner involved, and we decided to stop trading and allow for a structured wind down of the company. Now, there was some assets. The company had some valuable equipment and stock that needed to be sold properly, okay? Now, instead of them doing a valuation on the back of a fag packet that could be criticised, we introduced them to an independent valuing agent, okay? And this agent went down, they had a look at all the stock and all the equipment, and they produced a professional valuation report. And on that report, there's essentially two values. There's an in situ value and an ex situ value. And what in situ means is that's what the agent thinks it's worth to you as a director to pay it back in the same premises and just continue to keep trading. And in situ will have something called goodwill attributed to it. Ex situ is what this agent believes he will be able to realise at an auction scenario to get money back for creditors, okay? Now in this scenario, there was no in situ value because they were moving out of the site, they were downsizing to another part of the country. So what they did is they made an offer, it was between in situ and ex situ, that the agent has to recommend to the insolvency practitioner. So this director valued their assets and sold them to a new company, okay, before they appointed the liquidator formally. Now, what they did is they raised an invoice from insolvent company to the new company, and they agreed with the insolvency practitioner to pay it over terms. The new company had 6 months to pay for the assets, okay? In addition to that, there was a number of redundancies. They were unavoidable. The business was moving. So one of the worries for the director is they're not going to be able to pay staff's redundancy entitlement for those who've been there over 2 years, notice pay, holiday pay that's been accrued but not taken, and also there was some unpaid wages. Now, when you go through a voluntary liquidation, one of the things that happens is if the staff are entitled to redundancy pay, unpaid wages, holiday pay, the government will step in. The government cover these costs, and it's the redundancy payment service that pays them. Okay? So there are two real-life examples for you. The 4 key takeaways from both cases are, you know, if you've got a factoring company involved, be careful, it can be a major hurdle, okay? Speak to an insolvency professional because a lot of us might have a contact at the factoring company, okay? Be mindful of personal guarantees on leases, okay? Be really, really careful. Check your lease. If you're selling assets, sell them properly, okay? I don't even think that sounds right, selling something properly, okay? My grammar might not be proper, but the advice is, okay? And you need to get an independent agent involved. And the final thought is, if you're struggling, if you're overwhelmed with business debts, don't ignore the warning signs. It's going to get worse. There are legal tools that you can use to ensure that everybody gets treated equally and it's the best outcome for everyone. My name is Chris Worden. I'm from Director First. If you want some free and independent advice, reach out to me. Go and watch my next video here, or click and take the quiz down in the comment section for some free, independent and impartial advice. Bye-bye.